Good evening, and thanks so much for taking the time to watch tonight's special report, Hidden in Plain Sight, Protecting Our Children. I'm Barclay Bishop. For the next hour, my hope is that you become more aware that victims of child trafficking live throughout our community. We'll be covering sensitive topics that may make you feel a bit uncomfortable, but WJBF feels it's necessary for parents and viewers to hear if we're going to help bring an end to this horrific crime. So let's get started. Our first guests tonight are on the front lines of helping child trafficking victims and bringing them justice. I want to welcome this evening Assistant Special Agent in charge with the FBI, Brian Austin. Thanks for being here. The Executive Director of Child Enrichment, Carrie Viola Brooke, and then our District Attorney for the Augusta Judicial Circuit, Jared Williams. Thank you, each and every one of you guys, for being here tonight. I'm encouraged to see you all here. We've talked about this. You play a special role in helping these trafficking victims, and you work with one another in different capacities. But tonight, we really just want to get into what does child trafficking look like in our area? So many questions, such an important topic to cover as well. So Brian, let's start with you. What is child trafficking in our area?
So child trafficking in our area it's a little different than what you may think it is. It's a little different than what you see on TV. It's not like the movie Taken or necessarily the movie Sound of Freedom. Those are great movies and those crimes do happen. But at the local area, at least what we see here predominantly is more of a local child who's groomed in some way, whether that's via a family member or a known associate, or a lot of times a perceived significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend that comes in. They kind of convince them, coerce them through a grooming process, usually through giving them something in return, and then they will ask them to go out and perform sexual favors for other people and then return for money. That financial gain always goes back to the original person, so it doesn't go to the victim, and that's the commercial aspect of it. And it's not always money. It could be gifts, it could be a number of things, but there's some commercial transaction that takes place, which is why we call it commercial sex trafficking.
So you mentioned grooming, and Carrie, I want to bring you in on that. So what you do at Child Enrichment is that you do these forensic interviews with these children. What are you hearing when we talk about grooming? How do they get into this? Because this is not just, this can happen to any child very easily.
Yeah, and I think just like Brian was saying, the grooming aspect of it is a really big challenge. It's not this forceful event where somebody is just kind of taken, it's gradual. So it might start with somebody asking for like a small favor, that kind of testing the waters with the child to see like, okay, maybe I'll make the child feel comfortable doing this, and then it'll escalate to a little bit more. It might get more violent or more dangerous for the child. And it becomes this emotional part of grooming as well, where this child has this relationship with this person where sometimes they care about them and they might not want them to get in trouble. They might not also realize what's happening is wrong. And I think that's another thing people sometimes don't realize, that there's this whole manipulation aspect where kids don't, a lot of the time the kids we're talking to, it's not like they're saying, oh, thank you so much for getting us out of this situation. A lot of times they don't even want to be there talking to us about it.
Mm-hmm. And Jared, the district attorney, plays a big role in all of this. What do you do to help these victims?
So we fight for victims, we fight for survivors. We created a unit called the Special Victims Unit, and those are prosecutors that are focused solely on child cases and crimes against women and children. When law enforcement completes their investigation, they send those items over to us, we review it, we determine what charges are appropriate and what is the best strategy to take this to court and bring this person to justice.
Brian, we're talking about red flags. A lot of parents tuning in and community members want to know, what are we looking for? What do you look for in a child? Because it can look different in other ways. Yeah,
so again, it's a really good question. It's often very difficult to spot, but if you're paying close attention, you can see it. If a child comes home with things that they wouldn't normally have, maybe new purse, new shoes, more money in their wallet than they don't have a job, but they've got a lot more cash than they would normally have. Parents need to be questioning those items. And then the other side of that, we talked a little bit, and I think it's especially to Carrie's point, how it can be very difficult when there's family members that are doing that grooming, and it's not always mom and dad. A lot of times it's aunts and uncles or godparents. So if you're a parent and your kids are with another family member a lot during the day, don't just assume that they're safe. And I'm not trying to paint every family member evil, but because certainly that's not the case. But if you see things, you can't maybe just write it off as, oh, so-and-so bought this for my child. Kind of figure out why and ask them why, and then ask the child why. And that could maybe, start opening up a dialogue between a parent and a child, which may lead you down a path that'll help you uncover something that's going on in their life that is difficult.
Yeah.
Another thing we have to do is know what is on our children's phones.
Yeah.
You have to establish boundaries of what's acceptable, and a phone is not a diary. There's not a violation because the phone itself has access and grants access to other people who don't mean the best for your child.
Carrie, a lot of these kids are reluctant to come forward.
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons why kids are reluctant. So, it's so brave for the kids that do talk about it. But one of the things is a lot of times kids are in situations where maybe they feel like they've done something wrong. So maybe they snuck out and met this person, and kids don't have that thought process to be able to say, like, okay, even though I snuck out and broke this rule, I'm telling my parents something that's even bigger, and I'm not going to get in trouble for that. So there's that whole dynamic, and people that are grooming them and trafficking them use that to their advantage. They will say things to them like, well, if you tell, you're going to get in trouble because you stole that phone, or you snuck out, or you weren't supposed to be with me when we were here. So I think that's part of it. It is, we have a big issue with gang-related trafficking in Richmond County, and I have talked to kids before who said, listen, I'm not going to tell you about this because you can't keep me safe. And that is a concern, and I get that for them. There is a really valid fear for some of the kids we talk to.
Jared, family is something that we see a lot of where this happens in the home. And does that make it difficult to prosecute these cases, or just in general when we hear about a trafficker, like, why don't we see more traffickers going to court? Are they because they're being charged under something different? Kind of unpack that a little bit for us.
So part of the strategy in how you prosecute a case is you look at what are the best charges. What are the charges that get you the sentence and the consequence that you want in a way that is digestible and easy to be understood for a jury, so that when you are presenting evidence, you have the most likelihood of success. And so while you might not see a human trafficking charge, you're going to see very frequently we have aggravated child molestation cases. And those can have elements of human trafficking, but the sentence is the same. However, we can focus in on the right parts of the case that allow us to prosecute with success.
I'm going to get to you in a second because I have a big question for you, Brian. Carrie, real quick, placement is an issue. So we're talking about family. And then what do you do when a kid comes in and you interview and it's happening in their home? Where do these kids go?
That's a huge issue that we're having, not only here in Augusta, but across the state and across the country. Placement, foster care in general, there's not enough foster homes, and placement becomes a problem. So we know that we need to oftentimes put kids in a place where they are going to be safe, and we struggle with having appropriate placements for kids. So that is a big issue that I know the Department of Family and Children's Services runs into of, okay, we have identified this kid. They can't stay at their home because their parents were a part of the trafficking. Where do we put them? Mm-hmm. So oftentimes they do have to go out of the area, maybe to a placement in Atlanta or somewhere, but they're not able to stay here.
Brian, we're talking about what can parents look for, and something that you're very passionate about right now is sextortion. Explain to us what that is and how that can open the door for someone becoming a potential victim of trafficking.
Absolutely. I think Jared started to allude to this. Cell phones are a huge issue. Mm-hmm. And also, if you have a child that's already concerned that they've done something wrong, they may be reluctant to tell their parents or tell law enforcement, so they keep going with it. So sextortion, kind of in its most general phase, is a child takes a picture of themselves, something sexually explicit, and they send it to somebody else, and then somebody else, who they think probably is somebody their age, but in most likelihood it's not, then uses those images to extort them for financial gain. Or in the human trafficking, they may extort them to go and provide sexual commercial sexual exploitations with somebody else. So it starts down a chain, and so it's very important, like Jared said, to look at your kids' phones, monitor their use. I mean, I have 2 kids, and they both have phones, and of course we can't be with them 24/7, but they know that those phones are always going to be accessible to, their parents or their guardians or somebody's.
And we don't judge victims, okay? So whatever they may have done, we're not going to hold that against them, because at the end of the line, there's another person on the other side of that phone who knew better and knew exactly what they were doing, and they were taking advantage of the vulnerable minds of our young people. We recently had a conviction of a guy that was picking up this young lady from, met her on the internet, and then would pick her up from the bus stop, and then after he would do his vile acts, he would drop her back off at her middle school. We're not holding the child accountable for making poor decisions. We're holding the adult accountable for manipulating.
Very well said. I think the child has to know they can come forward, and I think their bravery to do that, in spite of that perceived stigma or concern, is it's very brave. And a lot of the kids don't do it, and that's what we need to see more of. Or the parents don't want to bring it to law enforcement because they think they've allowed their kids to do something and they're going to get in trouble.
What does a parent do who's watching that leaves this program and says, I need to help my child? Do I just go upstairs, grab their phone, and start looking through it? I mean, really, what's a practical first step? Is it having the conversation that they watch this, or just, what do you do?
I would say communicate, because I think when we're looking at child sex trafficking, especially, we know that majority of the kids that we are working with, they've had a history of abuse as well. So we need to start the conversation by communicating. And having those conversations and explaining to their child, like, hey, I'm gonna look through your phone, and I want to make sure you're safe, and these are some concerns. Or even saying to them, like Jared just said, you can always come to me and tell me, even if you broke a rule or did something, your safety is the most important and you're not going to be in trouble.
Most of these children are getting these phones and tablets or whatever, 8, 9, 10 years old. So having that conversation early on, letting them know that there's boundaries attached to it. It's harder to tell a 17 or 18-year-old that you're going to come look at their phone, but telling a 9, 10, 11-year-old that just got it for the first time, that's super excited about their new first technology, that's easier.
Yeah.
But
and you can start even earlier, teaching young people about bodily autonomy. You don't have to hug everybody just because they're in the room with you. Teaching them about what a good touch is and what a bad touch is, and helping them understand that they have agency over their own bodies, and that if anyone makes them feel like they don't, that they can come to you, and you're not going to judge them, you're going to listen to them, and you're going to protect them.
Coming up, you asked, now they'll answer. Our experts tackle viewer-submitted questions when we return.
So many of you are viewer-submitted questions leading up to tonight, and we want to make sure we get as many answered as we can. So while we have the 3 of you, let's move forward with that. Brian, starting with you, someone says, if someone sees something suspicious, what information should they be jotting down if they're at the grocery store and they suspect something? And then who do they report this to?
Great question by a viewer. So first and foremost, they should be careful. I mean, traffickers aren't looking for confrontation, but if you interrupt their mechanism for monetary gain, then they could become violent. So first of all, I would let the viewer know and people to be careful. But gather whatever information. Anything, license plate numbers. If you can get any other identifying information, a good description of the child. And if you're behind them at a store, maybe just say something to the clerk and say, hey, did they pay with a credit card? Maybe, you can say, I'm going to call the police and I'm going to tell them they purchased something at this time, so they can come back and get that information. So all those things will help lead us to the victim, and that's all we're trying to do.
Yeah, great information. Carrie, somebody asked about reunification. So if a parent is at the core of some of this and the problems are happening there, we do know that oftentimes you try to put the child back with the parent first. At what point do we stop putting these children back in the home that are being abused like this, if they're being trafficked?
Yeah, that's a really hard concept for people to understand. So The primary goal is reunification initially, but I say that to say, if appropriate, the juvenile court judges in our circuit and in this area are phenomenal, and they really try to do what's in the best interest of children, and they will take these things into consideration.
Jared, boys, we hear so often that girls get trafficked because that is the higher percentage of victims, but boys are trafficked as well, right?
Absolutely. And so it's about protecting all kids.
Yeah.
But it goes back to that statement that was made. Not every case looks the same. There's no way to know what a trafficker looks like or what a victim looks like. You've just got to be vigilant and protect the ones that you love.
And as we wrap up, I just want to ask, do you feel like the child trafficking conversation is growing, and do you feel like organizations, agencies like yourselves are working closer together to help identify or help get victims to talk more?
Yeah, I really think it has. We have talked for a long time about how if you look at the statistics, and Richmond County has the most confirmed cases of child sex trafficking in the state of Georgia. And I think part of that is because that we work together as a community. I do not believe we have more cases than Atlanta or anything like that. I think we just are all working together. So we're identifying kids more than these other communities are. So I think the numbers, however scary they are, I think it's a testament to the work that organizations are doing to identify kids and to really put services in place. So, I'm proud to work with both of them and the work that we're doing. And, both of them sitting up here saying, we're not going to prosecute kids, we're not going to arrest kids for these charges. And I hope kids are listening. And if they are in a situation, know that these two guys are here to help them. They're not here to get them in trouble.
Appreciate it.
I just think having the conversation that says, this is a problem. It may not look quite like it does in Hollywood, but it is a problem. But if we all work together, we can fix it, or we can at least identify it. I think that's great. And it's really a privilege to be in this community and working with these folks.
Coming up, sex trafficked as a teenager. A local woman shares her incredible story and a message for those who think it could never happen to them. We'll be right back.
Being sex trafficked is one of the most horrific crimes that can happen to a child. And as survivors recover, not many of them want to talk about this horrible experience, but we learn from these stories. And tonight, Amber Wilson is sharing hers with us. Amber, thank you so much for being here. The word brave comes to mind when I think about you sitting here preparing to share your story with us and giving hope to others this evening. So thank you for taking the time to be with us. You've been through a lot in your life. And when we hear of somebody coming forward to talk about their story, that is a massive step. But tell us what led up to this. What was your life like growing up?
So growing up, I did not have the ideal childhood. There was sexual abuse at the age of between 3 and 4 was my first encounter with sexual abuse. And then child molestation in physical abuse for the remainder of my young years. Just a broken home. So it was not, the ideal, life for a child that anyone would want to, it was just bad. It was hard. It was a hard life for a young child. So I think that's kind of what set the pace for rough teenage years, because you don't take a broken child and then become a full adolescent and then a productive adult. It kind of all just flows together.
So you went back and forth between your mother's home and your father's home, and at 15 years old, you became homeless. How did that happen?
Yes, so at 15, I came home one afternoon, and from walking down the street, I was coming from a friend's house, I was wondering, why are those trash bags on the front porch? What is my dad doing? What's going on? I'd stay the night with a friend, And I get up to the house and the door was locked, and I peeked in the windows and there was nothing in there. Everything was gone. And so he had moved, left no note, nothing, and just all of my belongings were in those trash bags on the front porch. And so that's what started my life and being a homeless teenager.
What'd you do?
I went through the bags. Well, at first I just kind of sat on the porch wondering, what do I do? So I went through the bags and got a backpack out and started putting things in it that, like a change of clothes and things that I would need right away. And then I hid the other things in the woods that were nearby, so that way I could maybe come back for those later. And then I went up to the convenience store and just kind of hung out for a little while, trying to figure out life. That night, I actually went back to the house and I broke into it. And I stayed in that house for a few nights, not knowing really what to do or where to go.
So you're 15, you're homeless, you turn 16, this corner store, this convenience store kind of becomes your hangout, so to speak. You weren't getting into drugs,
No.
but you were just trying to survive.
Yeah.
What started to happen as you hung out at the convenience store? People started to notice you, a man started to notice you.
Yeah, so when you tend to stay in the same area, a lot of people, also stay in that same area. And it was in a non-desirable neighborhood. So you have your pimps, your drug dealers, your, those types of folks that tend to stay in that area. And it was an older gentleman that would see me all the time, just, hanging out in the front of the store, asking people for change as they would walk in and out of the store. So he knew that I needed money. He knew that I needed money probably to eat, and so one afternoon he called me over to his car and said that he thought that he could help me out.
What happened next? What did he say?
He said, you can come to my house and you take a shower and I'll give you something to eat and just, come hang out, and I think that I have a way for you to make some money that you know. Yeah.
What was going through your mind when you were asked to come over to his car to go, to make some money? Did anything, any signals go off in your mind that maybe I shouldn't be doing this, or?
Yeah, I had the signals. I had the anxiety about it. This probably is not right. But when you're in despair, you kind of ignore those sometimes because you think, well, I'll just see. I'll go with them and, and see what happens. And
so you
take the chance.
Yeah. So you go with them, you go to the home. What happens that first weekend that you're there?
I don't recall day by day or how it all built up to how it ended. But I know at first he was nice, just kind of nice, and and you sit down and look at TV, get something to eat. It wasn't aggressively how it started out. And then after a few times, that's when, he just started taking pictures of me with his Polaroid camera.
So, we talk often about grooming. Looking back, would you say that was him building that relationship with you, gearing up for what was to come?
Yeah, he definitely, he wanted to make me feel safe. He wanted to make me feel like he was my friend or someone that actually genuinely cared about me and wanted to help me, because he kept saying that, I'm gonna help you. So he was definitely, grooming me and preying on my weaknesses.
So you go back to the corner store, then it gets a little bit more intense, right? What happens next? It goes from pictures to more, right?
Yeah. So once he took those pictures, as an adult now, I can look back and I know what he did with those. He took those pictures and then showed them to different gentlemen who said, yes, I'll pay X amount of dollars, for whatever services. And I did not know that's what, obviously he was doing with those. And so he would take me to a home and tell me, just go in the front door. There's a gentleman in there, and he would give me probably a random name. I'm sure it wasn't the person's actual name. And he just wants to spend some time with you. And you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. He would always make sure that he said that. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do.
How did that make you feel? Did you feel like then you were the one that was choosing to do that?
No.
Yeah.
It actually, I knew better because of sexual abuse as a child, that it's almost like it's reverse psychology. it's just, it's the oddest thing. They'll say, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, but in your mind you know that you need to do everything you're being told to do. Otherwise, there will be consequences.
Were you ever threatened? Did you ever feel like they were going to hurt you physically, or did you feel like you could have gotten out of that situation, or kind of what was going on through your mind through all these interactions?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I was necessarily afraid like that he was stronger than me or that, you know, physically threatened, but I knew that kind of my life hung in the balance with my next meal. You know, and when you're hungry and when you have nothing, you will, you know, resort to some pretty harsh measures in order to, you know, to eat and to have, you know, somewhere to stay at night sometimes. And
so just to be blunt, he was bringing you in and saying, I'll give you money that you can go and get food in exchange for having sex with these men. When you hear that now as an adult looking back, do you just think, what was happening to me?
Yeah, because as a child and back then too, because like I said, there was no cell phones, there was not the social media and things like that, so you didn't have resources really available to kind of understand some of the things that were happening. And so it wasn't until later in my adult life I realized that I was trafficked. And then it was just like a horrid thought that was like, how? You know, how did that happen? Why did I allow that to happen? But you didn't allow it, and I think that that's just, I mean, part of why we're doing this is just explaining you can get caught up in that, and a lot of girls now are doing it for nails done or for their, you know, for hair or anything of the sort. So going back to that time where you finally, something clicked, and how did you get out of this? So one night when there was a gentleman and he was a little more aggressive than others had been. And I felt sick. I knew that it was wrong, and I knew I did not want to partake in this any longer. And so I made a mad dash out of that house, and I just ran. And I ran back to the convenience store. It took me, you know, several hours to get back to that location. And it's funny though, because it was like the convenience store was my safe place. Although that's the place where it all started, because that's the only place that I knew that was home at the time, was that convenience store. It was familiar to me. I knew the homeless folks that, you know, frequent that store and were there. And so that was the only place that I had that was, you know, made me feel safe. Did he come after you? He didn't come after me, but he would sit up at the store in his car and just kind of look over at me. Almost like he was threatening me with his eyes, you know, that he could see me. He knew where I was. He knew where to find me. Maybe he did that to try to intimidate me so that way I wouldn't tell anybody. Maybe he was watching to make sure that I wasn't going to tell anyone what had happened. So that's what I think, you know, he was most likely doing. So often we talk about if you see something, say something, or if somebody thinks something is suspicious. That, in a sense, happened for you because a police officer kind of stepped in and helped you. Tell us what happened. Yeah, so there was a police officer, of course, that was his beat, you know, and they stay in the same area. And I believe that he would, you know, probably see me several times and come to realize that there was something different about me. And so one afternoon, he called me over to his car, and I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble now, what did I do? And he said there was a program available for abandoned teenagers, and that I should check it out. And he gave me a card. And so a couple of days later, I walked downtown to where that, you know, that place was, and started a journey to live in a better life. Your life has taken shape in such a positive way since then. Looking back, what do you tell 16-year-old Amber that you wish you could say to her now? What would I say to a 16-year-old Amber? Continue in the journey, because there's a bigger purpose. And I don't regret anything that happened, because I now have knowledge of the darkness, and I know what's in that darkness. And so when somebody comes to me and starts to tell me how they feel about something or something that's going on with them, I can say to them, I understand, and they know that I do. So I don't regret the things that happened to me. I use it to be, to empower others, I use it to gather my own strength to continue on through, different things in life that happen. So I would just tell myself, continue to be strong because it's for a larger purpose than you know.
It is so important in this special to let people know that if you are a victim or you don't realize that you are a victim, you're not going to be in trouble. It's not your fault. We've talked about this off camera too. You didn't think that you may have had a choice, but because he kept saying, you don't have to do this. It is that key phrase that kept you feeling shameful and that you couldn't have gone to someone. Explain or kind of take that home to people who are watching that think that they're at fault.
So I wish I could say the shame never, it goes away, but it doesn't. I still carry that shame because it was put in me to be ashamed of what I did. But I want people to know that if you are a victim, don't allow your predator to have that power over you to make you live in that shame, because you should be free. And even though I still carry some of that shame, it doesn't just magically go away. I can stand on it and just, be more than that. And they can too. There's so much more. And, there's a life after abuse, no matter what type of abuse that may be. And they are the victim. And just because they think that they had a choice and they made maybe the wrong choice, that predator knew what they were doing. And they are hoping and banking on the fact that you will keep on believing that it was your choice and you chose the wrong.
I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for being brave and sharing your story, because as we said at the beginning, not many people want to talk about that and rehash it.
I don't want to talk about it.
I know you don't, but it's so important for people to hear your true story and put a face to a story like that. Thanks so much.
Amber's life now is so much better than she could have ever imagined. She's married to her best friend, and their blended family includes 7 children. She volunteers with the youth in our community and recently did something big. She put pen to paper and wrote a book detailing her journey. The Bittersweet Truth is a story about courage, survival, and proof that the worst days can prepare you for the best ones to come. We'll be right back.
Well, thousands of students walk the halls of our schools in our area every day. Many of them are trafficking victims or at risk of becoming one. It's a very important topic to talk about, especially in our school system. Joining me now is Police Chief Gary Owens of the Columbia County School District.
Good morning.
And Police Chief Mantrell Wilson with the Richmond County School District.
Good morning.
Very important that you both are here today. I appreciate you joining us. Right off camera before we started, we talked about how you both are on the same mission, and it's really to raise awareness about this happening within our school system, because it can happen to our students, but also getting the word out to those who see these students every day, and your staff and your officers. And so, Chief Owens, let's start with you. Is this a new issue that we're seeing, or is it just something that we are talking more about and realizing we got to do something to be more proactive?
As parents, as faculty, as schools, you're starting to see more involvement in this topic. You're starting to see that the conversations are now coming up about this, which it should.
Because of that, you guys have had now a district-wide training officer that you've hired. Why was that important for you all to get ahead of that?
For a multitude of topics, not just for one specific topic, but to make sure all of our staff and all of the persons we have working for us know how to react in different situations. It could be anything from just a simple autistic child to something as serious as an intruder on the campus. Just making consistency throughout all the school district.
Chief Wilson, Richmond County, one of our biggest school districts in our area. Obviously, there's a lot of students there. And you have to help identify some of these that could be potential victims. What do you do with your officers? Are you training staff? Are you training officers? What are you looking for to help these kids?
Well, we train the officers. We had the FBI come in, give us information, the latest and greatest. We work with the Department of Homeland Security with the Blue Campaign, which gives out flyers, information to put out so that the information is readily available. There are just a lot of things that you have to look for. It's a very comprehensive subject. And it's ever evolving.
Yeah.
Things change. The people that do these things, they look for different ways to go around it. And so whatever we're doing, there's always a way to combat it.
Yeah.
So we have to try to do the best we can to stay in front of it.
Do you feel like you're making a difference? Do you, the question for both of you, Chief Owens first.
I feel if we start to get more parents and people engaged in this topic and other topics as well, the more that you can get the parents of students engaged with the school, the tighter the community can be. And us working together, we do, not just us alone, with McDuffie County, even South Carolina schools. We're doing a lot of communication. This is something that has been going on a while, but now it's becoming more and more. I mean, we're getting tighter with this situation, not just with the school districts, with the sheriff's office and police departments, becoming a stronger district as a group.
I know the biggest issue for a lot of these students and kids who are victims is that they don't even sometimes know they're a victim, or they think that because they took part in it, that there's no way they could be a victim.
Or they recognize, or the person involved in this is someone they trust.
Right. Yeah, that's the other big thing. And so how do you help these students, or what are you doing to help them know that they can come to you, know that they can come to a teacher, know that they can come to an officer within the district to maybe say something's not right here, I think something might be off?
Well, each investigation dealing with children, especially if it's sexual in nature, we send them to the Child Enrichment Center. And they help out tremendously. The Child Enrichment Center, the Sheriff's Office, their relationship, as Chief Owens said, their relationship amongst districts, because children often will pass from one district to the next and can tend to get lost based upon the people that they're dealing with. But there are a lot of things to look for, such as a child that has an abnormal amount of hotel keys, abnormal amount of money in their pocket. The child is dressing a lot older than what they seem to be. When they're talking to their friends, the boyfriend is a lot older or more, or really abusive towards them. So there are signs that we can look for. There are signs that we attempt to let the students know, let the teachers know, and so that there's some sort of way to identify.
Yeah.
Just changes in behavior, you know, just small things. And this is where that in-tune relationship with the parents and their students and the teachers and their students, because a lot of times the teachers will say, you know, this student is acting a little differently, and there's some kind of cause whatsoever, you know. Like Chief Wilson said, there's a change in behavior, change in culture, change in friends.
I want to talk about real quick the parents and just building that relationship with their schools where their child goes, and the importance of that, because if a teacher or somebody in faculty calls the parent and says, we are noticing there's a slight change in behavior here, talk about the need for a parent to be open to receiving that.
Oh yeah, 100%. Parents should be more open to receive that type of information. So a lot of times a parent or someone will just say, that's not happening in my home. I know my child. You know, how many times have you heard that? You know, I know that's not going on in my home, and you're bringing this stuff to light, and a lot of times they're going, oh my God, this is the first time they're hearing of it. So like I said, it goes back to being a good parent, not just getting involved in their social media, their school activities. Look at what they're writing down. Are they making gang symbols? You know, look at the clothing that they're wearing. You know, just like Chief Wilson said, it takes a lot to be a parent. I'd be really scared to be a parent right now with so much going on in the world. But we can work together, and that's the whole thing. We all partnership together as law enforcement, but we want to partner as a community to make our families stronger.
Yeah.
Well, in addition to that, there has to be collaboration.
Yeah.
And so let's work together. If the teacher tells you, the difference between the teacher, the SROs, the staff, is that we get to see your child in their element. They're not in their element at home. They're with us, they're amongst their peers, they're a lot more loose, and the peer pressure becomes a part, and wanting to be looked at in a certain light plays a part in that. But with collaboration, then we can monitor what your child is doing so that we tell you that there's an issue, then we talk about it. Here's what happened today. And so it shows a progression.
Yeah.
That way we can deal with it holistically versus just touching a portion.
Right. Well, I appreciate you both being here. Thank you so much. I know
Thank
that
you.
you
Well,
do
Thank you for
things.
this opportunity for doing this.
Well, we felt it was very important to talk about, and that's why we brought you in, and we certainly wanted to touch on the school aspect of this. That was much needed. So thank you both
Thank you.
very, very much for what you do and for helping our children.
Up next, South Carolina is working to protect its children through the help of a statewide task force. After the break, we'll look at the challenges Aiken and surrounding counties are facing. Stay with us.
I'm Chris Jakimick. I served in the United States Air Force and I deployed 3 times. So in 2017, I was serving as an Air Force First Sergeant. Our motto in that role is, my job is people, everyone is my business. But unfortunately in that year, I would lose my own brother, Lance Corporal Adam Jakimick, to suicide. The majority of veteran suicides are from guns. I store my weapons securely, not only for myself, but for my family. My service never stops.
We continue now in South Carolina. The counties in our area are certainly not immune to child trafficking either. Joining me now is Marianne Burgess, the Executive Director of the Children's Center Advocacy Center of Aiken County. Marianne, thank you so much for being a part of this program tonight.
Thank you.
You bring an interesting perspective. You have a background in law enforcement for over 30 years, and much of that focusing on crimes against children. And now you're this Executive Director for the Advocacy Center. Talk to us about what you're seeing when it comes to sex trafficking, specifically in Aiken County.
Well, many people may or may not know about a Child Advocacy Center, but we receive intakes from law enforcement and DSS on a wide variety of crimes against children, and one of them might be a trafficking complaint. We see all sorts of sexual assaults and physical assaults, emotional assaults. But human trafficking does play a role in our center.
Do you find that these victims are more coming from a family situation where it's been happening in their family, in their homes, or are you seeing more boyfriend, girlfriend, or gang, or what does it look like there?
Well, we see it coming from a lot of those that you just mentioned. We have some that may be in foster care. We have some that it may be an intrafamilial trafficking situation where you have a drug-dependent caregiver. Could be grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, aunt, uncle. So it just depends on their situation, their life situation. So it could come from the family. We are seeing that. We're seeing it from, a recovered runaway situation.
So you sit on the, I want to get this right, the task force chair of the 2nd Judicial Circuit for the South Carolina Human Trafficking Task Force.
Yes.
That is a mouthful. In a nutshell, though, you're sitting on a state task force and helping to do what? What is this task force that's been implemented trying to do for our children in that state?
We're getting stronger and stronger as we meet, both as a state and individually in our regions. We're launching a new traffic-proof educational series for our kids, our communities. So we work in our region to bring awareness to what it is, what it looks like. We try and hold events. So we look for those community partners that can aid us, because it's going to take everybody to combat this. Police can't do it alone. DSS can't do it alone. The Child Advocacy Center certainly can't do it alone. We need all eyes on this and everyone to do their part.
Is it getting worse, or do you think people are recognizing maybe a potential victim more? What are you seeing? Are we doing a better job, or can we do an even better job?
Well, I think we can do an even better job, but it's going to take what we're already doing, getting the education and awareness out there to our community members, because just like this says, these people are hiding in plain sight. They might be your next door neighbor. It might be your niece and you have no idea, or even your nephew, because our boys are very underreported.
And that was one thing that we talked about with the DA, Jared Williams, earlier. Boys are trafficked as well. I mean, girls are the ones that you hear often about because that's a higher percentage, but what does it look like for a boy to be trafficked?
It's the same way the girls are trafficked. It could be family, it could be a runaway situation. It could be going to a party and someone inviting you to participate in something that, maybe they're curious, and then it turns out to be something very different.
What challenges does the agency face? Is it placement? Is it, what roadblocks do you run into?
A lot. We, in South Carolina, we're working toward getting more placements for our kids because that is probably one of the biggest lack of resources that we have is placement once they're recovered. We do have a home in Aiken that is trying to receive the funding to be able to open. So that would be great right here in our community, but it hasn't happened yet. So we have to look toward other resources such as Columbia, who has a couple of placement sources, but we have none right here in Aiken County.
Overall in our area, what do you want people to know about trafficking and these children who are becoming victims in their area?
They need to be aware. There's all sorts of little education pieces they can look up themselves, like the National Trafficking Hotline online. There's all kinds of information, myth versus fact. There's a program called I Am on Watch, and I love I Am on Watch, and I think it's .org if I'm not mistaken. They really put human trafficking, sex trafficking, in a way that people can understand it. Right from a teacher in a classroom to someone sitting in a restaurant.
Marianne, thank you so much. I certainly appreciate you sharing that. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just that as a society, we need to be more mindful, be more aware, and it's going to take everybody to combat all of the ills of our society, and especially child sex trafficking.
We appreciate everything you do. Thank you so much, Marianne. We'll be right back. We hope tonight provides you with an understanding of what child trafficking looks like in our community and what our local leaders are doing to help stop it. But we still need your help. We have a list of programs on WJBF.com that are looking for volunteers to help victims in their recovery. There's a list of red flags to look for and numbers to call if you suspect trafficking. And I want to send a special message to any victim who may be watching. You are just that, a victim, and you have not been forgotten. If you're in danger, call 911. There are people waiting to help you. Thanks so much for watching.
Actor in an ad that was given 12 seconds to remind you that if you're high, just don't drive. Because if you feel different, you drive different. It's illegal to drive high everywhere anyway.
I'm Chris Jakimick. I served in the United States Air Force and I deployed 3 times. So in 2017, I was serving as an Air Force First Sergeant. Our motto in that role is my job is people, everyone is my business. But unfortunately in that year, I would lose my own brother, Lance Corporal Adam Jackamick, to suicide. The majority of veteran suicides are from guns. I store my weapons securely, not only for myself, but for my family. My service never stops.